All right, welcome back, everybody. I know it's been a little while since I've had a guest on the channel, and so I just decided to go kind of crazy with it and bring on two guests, two good friends of mine who are part of the ExpressionEngine team. And if you have not been following me for a long time, you probably have not heard the words ExpressionEngine coming out of my mouth, because I feel like it's been 10 years since I did any work with ExpressionEngine. But I have developed and continued relationships with folks in the ExpressionEngine team, especially Tom, who's the primary guy behind ExpressionEngine right now. And we've gotten to have a lot of really good conversations about it that I'm been digging into over the last couple of weeks and super excited to share with y'all. So before we talk about anything else, Tom and Bryan, can you just introduce yourselves? Tom first and then Bryan, so people know who you are. And then I got a couple questions for you to get us started.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Tom Jaeger. I call myself the refounder of ExpressionEngine. We stepped in about 3 years ago, kind of taking over ExpressionEngine development as a whole. So,
all right.
Yeah, and I'm Bryan Nielsen. Been working with Tom at Packetide for a long time. We started in on Laravel 4 way back when and doing a lot of EE work. So this is, fun to bring them together.
I love it. And it's really fun for me seeing, like, because, one of the things that often comes to us at Titan is these questions about, well, what kind of CMS should we be using and what CMS is written for Laravel people? And there's some CMSs that really push their Laravel foundations, some of which are honest and some of which are a little bit less honest about how actual Laravel-y they are. But a lot of people end up choosing, tools like wonderful tools like Statamic, I love Jack, because it's Laravel connection. But not a lot of people understand that there's actually Laravel connections in other places. And so the fact that you guys are a Laravel development shop, and you do other things as well, that have taken over this non-Laravel based CMS. And I mean, like, ExpressionEngine was also based or connected to CodeIgniter a little bit. And I don't want to go into that too much, but like, there's a lot of overlap here. There's a lot of ties here between those communities that I don't think a lot of people know about. So before we talk about this new cool stuff, Coilpack, that I'm all excited about, can you guys just tell me, like, if somebody has never heard of ExpressionEngine before and they are a Laravel programmer, can you just give me a little bit of context about what is EE?
I would describe ExpressionEngine as a very, not simple, like it can't handle complex things, but try to simplify your content management approach, breaking it down to the core building blocks of what your structured content is. And, for many years, I think we're going on 20 years of ExpressionEngine this coming year, so a big anniversary. But for many years, this template language that it brought to itself was a very simplified, expressive way to build these templates with your content. And that's been one of its big strengths over the years.
Tom, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I'd add, I think ExpressionEngine originally found itself as kind of the OG of structured content management systems, if you will, where there is a database architecture underlying that matches your content, where it's not always true with some of the other CMSs out there in the world. And then they coupled that with a very intuitive templating language that became a great proponent of its success over the years. It's also kind of become a sticky point as the web has continued to progress as a whole. Matt, you made mention earlier, CodeIgniter was originally extracted from the ExpressionEngine core, modified some obviously, but so it's got some pretty deep roots in the web development world as a whole. It's a good question.
Yeah, for sure. And for myself, so I think I'm probably the best and worst person to answer this question. I'm the worst because I don't live in EE like you do, but the good news is I have the outside perspective. I'm going to say something and you all tell me if this is actually right. In my mind, Drupal is just gargantuan chunks of semi-related data that you really have to have your brain wrapped around all the different pieces in a pretty nuanced and complicated way. But the bigger the organization, the bigger the need you have for, like, this piece of data in this contextual way, pull it across this one. I mean, Drupal can do everything, but in order to be so powerful, it has to be very complicated. Outside of Drupal, you've got more like WordPress is how a lot of people think of things, right? You've got like basically a single entry into a single channel, like blog, and then that's all you've got. And when you need something between WordPress and Drupal, that's when you get into these world of these structured content management systems. And I'm sure there's tons of them, but in the PHP world, we often hear the most about November, Craft, Statamic, ExpressionEngine. I don't know if there are any other ones I should be naming, but those are the ones I think of. And when I think through those, I always think of, like you said, the OG being ExpressionEngine, because I know that Craft and Statamic definitely came out of the ExpressionEngine world. But I also think that even if somebody has not come out of that world, they've learned a little bit. And in my mind, the innovation that ExpressionEngine brought about, at least in my life when I did EE in the past, was this idea that you don't have the single channel. It's not just blog has entries, but it's like multiple different channels, and some of those channels might have many entries, some of those channels might have a single entry, but you have these multiple different structures, sort of like in Laravel, we have multiple different database tables that each have, entries within them. That was something that felt really unique to EE, and that it introduced in a way that a lot of other people do now. But if you've got like a list of FAQ items, and you've got a list of testimonials, and a list of staff members, and those collections, and we use those in things like static site generators as well. It feels to me like EE was the first, at least PHP-based CMS that was really doing that and really introduced that idea in a way that we all work with. Does that track with y'all's understanding of kind of the history there?
I'd say so if you look back at the history. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Definitely.
So we've got a CMS that's been around for quite a while, and we've got a CMS that has a relationship to the history of Laravel, because a lot of us know that like CodeIgniter was one of the first places in PHP that Taylor got started, and he did look to the CodeIgniter community for inspiration for a lot of the building of Laravel. And then EE has been kind of like sitting in its own little world for quite a while, and I'm sorry to say this on a call with you guys because I want this to be pro EE, but I don't think I could be honest without saying this. I have trashed EE a lot. Like, and if anybody knows me and they don't hear me say that honestly on this call, they're going to know that I'm just doing a puff piece. This is not a puff piece. I'm excited about this. I've trashed EE a lot because, and you do not have to agree, because I don't want y'all to have to say yes to criticisms and whatever, but I'm going to say I criticized it because I don't think that the team that was running it at the time understood what keeping up with modern technology advancements look like. And that's why CodeIgniter died. And that's why EE stagnated. And I have often told people, my friends who run EE shops, I'm like, get out, get away, blah, 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 blah. And then Packet Tide took over EE. And I went, hold on. Now we have a development shop that knows what they're doing. They understand what migrations are. They understand modern development stacks. And they're going to try and bring this best thing. And Tom would often tell me, no, this is what I'm doing. And I'm like, okay, I'm curious. Not going to switch to EE, but I'm curious. And then I heard about this Coilpack thing, and it blew my mind. And I've just gotten the chance to play with it lately, and we've done some stuff to the Titan. And I'm really impressed with how you all are being able to bridge the old school EE and all the existing EE installs with very, very modern development stacks. So that's why I said I got to get on a call with y'all. I got to have you kind of tell the story about what Coilpack is. So our next question is, what is Coilpack? And again, we're primarily targeting people who also didn't know what ExpressionEngine is, but I know you might have to use some EE type language. But for a Laravel developer, what's Coilpack?
Yeah, great question. If you don't mind, I'm going to sidebar us a little bit. I'm actually going to go back and talk a little bit about why Coilpack. For sure. And then I'll let Bryan kind of talk more of the nuts and bolts on what Coilpack is. Bryan is the lead developer on Coilpack. He was the head of all of our Laravel development. We kind of shut that down for the most part when we took on ExpressionEngine. So when we look at ExpressionEngine, 3 years ago when we came in, there's a lot of questions you have to ask, and about kind of modern content management systems, verticals of growth. When I say verticals of growth, I mean for a content management system, not for a given agency. We find that people are often like, oh, you mean like higher ed, or like no, not exactly. So, then we entered this journey of modernization, product modernization, and then looking at it and saying, okay, well, how do you kind of decouple ExpressionEngine? You start asking these questions, and you start looking at these problems, if you will, from a coding perspective, but you have to keep in mind the end, value proposition to developers and organizations. And you say, well, how do you span these different camps of modern web development compared to where EE is, but still keep the fundamental core stable, reliable. So you start looking at this problem, and it really took, so we're kind of segueing into Coilpack now. We really took an approach similar to, quite frankly, research and development. Funny enough, Matt, I remember one of the first calls, and we were starting to kick around Coilpack probably two years and change ago. I jumped on a call with you and Philip Zangel and just said, hey, we're thinking of this decoupled architecture. I don't know of an example of a place where this is done. Is this insane, or does this actually make sense? So what is Coilpack? Coilpack is, at its fundamental, it's a Laravel package, it's a composer package with Laravel that basically brings a lot of the Laravel ecosystem to bear on ExpressionEngine. Bryan, I'll let you take it from here.
I like that you used the word bridge before, Matt. I think that's that's a term I like to use a lot to describe this, and that's really what we're doing. You essentially start with a fresh Laravel app, you install Coilpack, and then it is the bridge from your Laravel app to ExpressionEngine, whether you're pulling in an existing install or you're starting with a new one. It's kind of the glue that's holding everything together, and it's all of the routing is happening through Laravel. It's saying, hey, do you have any Laravel routes all ready to handle this request? If so, we're just in a Laravel app. But if you don't, we're going to say, hey, does ExpressionEngine want to handle this route? And we kind of pass that along to ExpressionEngine's routing. And it looks like if you don't have any Laravel routes set up, it's just going to look like your ExpressionEngine site. Everything's going to pass through. It's going to route the way it used to in ExpressionEngine. So it's really kind of bringing those two together in one installation. And we took that opportunity to use some of the stuff that we've loved for years in Laravel, the event system, Eloquent, all the stuff that we've really enjoyed since version 4. Back then we did a lot of CodeIgniter and Laravel, and we've been on boards for the last 10 years. It's just been great.
Yeah, and that's a really helpful introduction. And I know we don't have a lot of time to go into great depth, but let's just talk about certain circumstances in which I might be using this kind of like the both of these systems. So I've got a Laravel app, and my client comes along and says, I need to do a content management system. So I decide that I'm going to test out what it looks like to use EE as the expression, or as the CMS for this site. So we've got an app that's hosted under, whatever, let's say /app. So mysite.com/app. And we got all the routes there. And then we got the home page, and maybe there's going to be like a blog or something like that. What does it look like? So I install Coilpack. It sets up an ExpressionEngine site. But now what does the actual process of making those routes be served by ExpressionEngine look like? And are there multiple options? Can I have it be served by ExpressionEngine or pull data from EE into my Laravel app? Can you kind of talk me through like what are my options there, and what are the steps kind of look like?
Yeah. It's a great question. I would say there are a lot of options. You'd bring that in. You create your structured content models in ExpressionEngine, how you want that data to look. And then you have the option to bring that into a Laravel view. You can use our ExpressionEngine models, our Eloquent models, and put them right in your existing Blade templates and pull it in like that, which you might find helpful if you've got a homepage written in Laravel already, a lot of dynamic content coming in, but you just want to stick that, latest blog entry at the bottom or something. And, that's a super easy way to do that. But if you do want to manage the template for that blog or whatever piece of content we're talking about in ExpressionEngine with ExpressionEngine templating language or Twig or Blade or whatever you'd like to use there, you can set up a template in ExpressionEngine, and we do routing kind of based off the template group and template name. So it's typical for you to have, a blog group and an index page that would list out all of the blog articles at just /blog. So yeah, lots of options.
Okay. So if I were going to do it, like, again, Laravel programmer just needs a CMS. I'm not familiar with ExpressionEngine. I'm not familiar with ExpressionEngine's templating. Let's assume I'm definitely going to want Blade, and I understand how routing works, with the route matching and then a controller, so /blog, and then we maybe have /blog/ the slug of the title, whatever. I know how to do that. Is there any benefit to me? Like, does the client get a better experience if I use ExpressionEngine's routing for that whole section, and I just trust that EE is going to own /blog entirely? Or am I getting the same value and it's more just about, like, what am I comfortable with?
Yeah, I would say it's where you want to draw that line and what the client is going to do. ExpressionEngine can manage templates right through the control panel. So if you have a client who likes to be a little more hands-on with some HTML changes, maybe they have that competency or their team does, maybe it makes sense to put that in there so you don't have to give them Git access and, make them part of your Laravel deploy process. But if you are the only developer working on that, I'd go wherever it's fastest and most comfortable.
Okay. If we are using Git, do we have the ability, and I should have asked you this ahead of time because I don't actually know the answer to this. If we are using Git, and then that we allow the client to make template changes on production, do we have the ability to basically do hooks that basically commit it to Git after they make those changes?
So template changes can happen to the file system. They also can happen in the database. So and Tom probably knows this better too, but template changes do end up in the database. So if you push new code up and the modified, I think it's keyed off the modified time, and the modified file that you're pushing up is older than what the changes in the database, then their changes are fine on production from the database. They take precedence.
So one of the things that brings to mind for me is ExpressionEngine historically has stored a lot of things in the database that a Laravel app would store in code. You mentioned templates, but I also know, for example, in ExpressionEngine, what we would think of as like a database tables structure, its schema, which is like what fields are there under FAQ, would be something that we change in the code, right? We go to the migration and we make a new migration that says add XY field, maybe the color for every FAQ item. You're going to add that to that particular thing, and then it's going to migrate a database, and then it's going to get pushed forward. But with ExpressionEngine, the client can come in and they can make a change and add that field directly in the user interface, and that's all going to get managed in the database. Do we have the ability to pull in that kind of data? You mentioned Eloquent, and can you maybe just talk a little bit about like what is my experience with using Eloquent to access that data, knowing it's not backed in the same way as like a traditional Laravel app would be? Like let's say I want FAQs, and all of a sudden there's a new field there. Do I just still get all my entries from Eloquent? Like, can you just talk through like how do my Eloquent models on my traditional database tables and my Eloquent models that are pulling EE-based data, how are they similar? How are they different?
Yeah, so we're doing a little bit of magic to make those custom fields just appear on your Eloquent model. You have a channel entry model that's kind of the core of all of this. But then as you add fields to it in the control panel and you add, an address field or something, and that's new, it just shows up through the accessor on that model so that you can, start using that. But nothing else is changing.
Love it. When we worked for one of our biggest clients, when I first started, working with Titan, when we first started Titan 12 years ago, 11 years, something like that, we were saying, we want to build this Laravel app and we want to use EE as the backend. And the fact that the EE's complicated database structure that is allowing you to basically treat it like it's actually separate tables, but because the clients can edit it, it's not actually separate tables fully, and EE is just managing all this. They're like, you don't want to touch that, right? Like you don't want to interact with that. If you tried to build your own models to interact with that, it would just break over time. And so what I'm hearing this to be is that you all are taking the responsibility for building tooling that says you use it as if it were one database table. FAQs as if it's a table, even though it's not. You're kind of doing that magic, to say you will be able to interact with it as if it were, and just trust that we're going to make this work for you. That's pretty magical, right? Like the user's able to edit this kind of stuff and us able to interact with it as if it was our traditional system, and you're putting all that work in to kind of bridge the gap between the two. So are there any other
Matt,
pieces? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, to just kind of elaborate on that a little bit. The old EE model, which is what you're referring to, was a series of columns on a table generally. So the new model is really a table per field type. So your CMS has different field types, right? Select, drop down, a title field, a text input, things like that. Each of those in its own table. So the queries do line up a little bit more traditionally in that sense.
Yes.
Where it gets a little interesting is when you're working with a site that's maybe been upgraded from version 1 or version 2 up into version 7, and then you have this mix. Those are good examples of where behind the scenes it's just showing up in your model. And it's correct. But yeah, just kind of a little background there.
Yeah, for sure. So I know we don't have a ton of time, so I have one more question for you after this, but is there anything else that you think that a Laravel developer coming into just considering the possibility of using ExpressionEngine and saying, all right, what's this Coilpack thing? Is there anything else they should know about how it works or why it's compelling to them? Or at this point, it's like, hey, if you're interested, go check out the tutorials.
Yeah, I think a big thing that we're trying to do is just give you a lot of stuff for free in there. You install this, you get access to this content management system, you get access to a GraphQL, endpoint for all of this content, which just opens the doors to, so many options these days. That's the big push, headless, composable, that kind of architecture. So to be able to just install this and get your content in and then, branch it off to open up your server environment, to Netlify or Gatsby Cloud, all those things, I think is just a big win.
I would just add to that, we all actually own several Laravel applications as well. We didn't talk about that. We don't need to now, but I think our experience with that and with a lot of client Laravel applications was always, you don't want to take on managing the content as part of your Laravel application. And I'm sure all of us have done that in some degree. Oh, it's just a quick field, let's pop it in the database and pull it out, right? There's a very large difference between actually using a CMS, and there's a lot of good options out there too. We do understand that. I think what makes this interesting or compelling is you can really use as little or as much of ExpressionEngine as you want, from the content management perspective, but also from the routing and the build-out perspective. You really could build it all in Laravel. You really could build the entire marketing site or site in ExpressionEngine as well. So,
right.
It's kind of an interesting hybrid approach, if you will.
That's a great point. And I really think this opens it up to kind of grow with you. You can start very small, just use a few pieces of this along the way, or you can start, layering more onto it and just taking it as far as you can go.
I love that. And my last question, I'm actually going to switch it a little bit from what I told you all originally. You already mentioned GraphQL, and you mentioned headless, and you mentioned Gatsby and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, obviously this is opening up the possibility that it's possible we wouldn't even need the Laravel part of this. So is there a case to be made for us to consider using ExpressionEngine just as a headless CMS with a GraphQL kind of like opening up to whatever the front end is? And if so, what does that flow look like? Is it install Laravel app, hook in Coilpack, and just hit that GraphQL endpoint with some other endpoint? Or kind of what do you envision there for what this is opening up for us using that GraphQL, using it headless?
Sure. And that's kind of the idea for much of the ExpressionEngine community, is to not make them learn Laravel and get into that. So that was kind of the low friction. We're using Laravel because it's incredibly powerful, beautiful code. We're very comfortable with that. So we're certainly leveraging that to make this experience happen. But if you're an ExpressionEngine developer and you just want to write Twig templates, you don't have to know, anything about Laravel routing or models to make that happen. So that's certainly a consideration for us. I think in terms of Coilpack, Laravel is going to be a foundational part of that for a while.
But if I were to take Laravel and ExpressionEngine, hook together with Coilpack, build out the whole app in ExpressionEngine, and not use any templates for either, no Laravel templates, no ExpressionEngine templates, and just say, all right, cool, here's the data in Graph. Because so we did this when one of our apps it needed a blog. We ended up basically setting up headless WordPress on a totally separate domain, and basically just called the WordPress API to get data into our, I think Vue or something like that. I don't even remember what it was.
I'm sorry,
but we didn't touch a single bit of templating there. Yeah, it was, I had a friend do it. I didn't have to do it myself.
Perfect. Good.
But let's say I had some front end and it was a Next.js front end or Nuxt or Gatsby or whatever else it ends up being. Is this part of the vision that you all have? Do you imagine somebody just saying, cool, we've got Laravel EE Coilpack and this little buddy, and all it does is just expose all that data out to GraphQL, and then you all run with it somewhere else?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I misunderstood what you were asking before, but that's absolutely a use case for it. And we're trying to, make that GraphQL experience as familiar to ExpressionEngine developers as possible, but, adding lots of parameters, the ability to do a lot of filtering on the server side and get that data the way you want it without, necessarily having to write a ton of JavaScript just to get that in the format you want.
Nice. I love that. Well, guys, that's the end of my questions. Do you have any other things you'd like to say before we wrap this up? Saying, hey, Laravel developers who've never heard of Coilpack before, never heard of ExpressionEngine before, is there anything else they should hear? All right. If they were to want to get started, where's the next place for them to go?
Yeah, I'd say if people want to get started, we always encourage people to jump into Slack, but check out the GitHub repo. And from there, you can go over to the docs. We have a series of getting started guides, whether you want to jump in headless or just Twig or use it alongside an existing Laravel app.
I hear that the Titan website is going to be a great place for that too, right?
Yeah, if you do check out ee.titan.com, we are going to have some tutorials there kind of teaching just what our experiences have been like when we're working with it. So thanks for knowing that, Bryan. We currently have one up there that's talking about how to add EE and Coilpack to existing Laravel app, and we're about to push one up. It might be up by the time this video goes out. That is basically what it looks like to take ExpressionEngine and Coilpack and Laravel, and then just expose the GraphQL and use it in next.js, put it up on Versal. So we got that headless, that composable, that decoupled, the serverless, however many other hot words we can come up with here. We're going to have all that together in one. So definitely check that out too. All of this, I will have links to all this in the comments, but also probably be putting fun little links down at the bottom as y'all are watching this video later. So, well, Tom and Bryan, I really appreciate you taking some time to teach our community a little bit about ExpressionEngine and also the work that you all have done to make this something that I'm actually talking to you about. And again, I don't want to be a hater, but I have been a hater. I've been a big old EE hater for a decade. And so the fact that I have you on here and I'm excited about it is a really cool testament to the work that you've done to really kind of change the direction of this framework or the CMS. I just really want to name that. Like, I did not expect to say on my YouTube, I'm excited about ExpressionEngine, and I'm happy to eat crow here, right? But just great work, guys. Like, really good work in the direction you're taking this. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a lot of work.
Yeah, I can tell. And to the rest of you all, I will see you all next time.